For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a crisp autumn morning in September 2000, 36-year-old Dr. Connor Mitchell and his graduate student Isabel Thompson set out from their research station in Michigan's vast Hiawatha National Forest. They never returned. Despite an exhaustive search across the remote Upper Peninsula wilderness, both scientists seem to have vanished into the ancient forest they dedicated their lives to studying. Their abandoned camp told a puzzling story, laptops still humming, specimen collections meticulously labeled, but their satellite phone untouched on the desk. For 18 years, two families lived with the crushing weight of uncertainty, while the dense canopy of the Hiawatha kept its dark secret. Then, in 2018, a routine logging operation uncovered something that would shatter the silence of the forest. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson, two researchers who ventured into the wilderness in search of rare flowers, but stumbled upon something far more dangerous. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. In the vast expanse of Michigan's Hiawatha National Forest, where ancient trees cast long shadows across the forest floor, the disappearance of Dr. Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson would become one of the Upper Peninsula's most perplexing mysteries. On a crisp September morning in 2000, the two researchers set out from their remote research station, carrying only basic equipment and their unwavering passion for botanical discovery. Dr. Mitchell, a respected botanist from Michigan State University, had dedicated the past 5 years to studying endangered orchid populations in the region's delicate ecosystem. His graduate student, Isabel Thompson, shared his enthusiasm for conservation, having joined the project 6 months earlier with dreams of completing her doctoral thesis on rare plant species preservation. Their research station, a modest cabin equipped with sophisticated monitoring devices, stood as a lonely outpost in the wilderness. The last communication from the site came at 8:43 a.m. when Dr. Mitchell logged a routine weather report and vegetation analysis. Their planned expedition that day was meant to document orchid populations in a previously unmapped sector of the forest, approximately 3 miles northeast of their base. By nightfall, when no further communications had been received, their absence raised no immediate alarms. The researchers often worked long hours in the field, taking advantage of every moment of daylight. But when dawn broke the following day with still no word, Dr. Patricia Wilson, Mitchell's research partner at Michigan State, knew something was wrong. The team had never failed to check in for more than 24 hours. The scene that greeted the first search party revealed an unsettling tableau. The research station's equipment hummed steadily, collecting data from various forest sensors. 2 cups of coffee sat half-finished on the wooden table, one still bearing Isabel's lipstick mark. Their satellite phone lay charging in its cradle, and their emergency beacon remained untouched in its protective case. Their detailed research logs ended abruptly mid-entry, with Dr. Mitchell's precise handwriting trailing off mid-sentence during a notation about unusual ground disturbance near their study sites. As state police and forest rangers combed the surrounding area, they found no signs of struggle, no indication of wildlife encounters, and no clues to suggest where the researchers might have gone. Their vehicle remained parked outside the cabin, and their essential gear was missing only the items they would have carried for a day's expedition: 2 field notebooks, sample collection bags, and basic surveying equipment. Lieutenant Kevin Murphy of the Michigan State Police led the initial investigation, coordinating with local search and rescue teams. The search pattern expanded methodically, but the dense forest canopy hampered aerial surveys, and the rocky terrain complicated ground searches. Tracker dogs lost the researchers sent less than a mile from the station, where it simply vanished near a small creek. As days turned into weeks, the the absence of any trace of the missing scientists deepened the mystery. No distress signals had been activated, no emergency protocols initiated. It was as if the forest had simply swallowed them whole, leaving behind only questions and the steady hum of their abandoned equipment, still faithfully recording data from a forest that now held its secrets closer than ever. The disappearance sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Dr. Mitchell had been on the verge of publishing groundbreaking findings about orchid population dynamics in changing climates. Isabel Thompson's promising career had barely begun. Their families clung to hope as autumn painted the forest in brilliant colors, but as winter's first snows began to fall, that hope grew increasingly desperate. What no one could have known then was that the truth lay buried beneath the forest floor, entangled in a web of greed, environmental destruction, and a lucrative illegal trade that would take 18 years to uncover. The forest held its secret well, while the machines in that lonely cabin continued their vigilant recording, bearing silent witness to an absence that would become legend in the Upper Peninsula's dark history. As autumn deepened in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the investigation into the disappearance of Dr. Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson intensified. Dr. Patricia Wilson, reviewing their last known research data from her office at Michigan State University, found herself repeatedly drawn to Connor's final notations about disturbed soil patterns. Something about those observations nagged at her scientific instincts, though she couldn't quite piece together why. Lieutenant Kevin Murphy's investigation team meticulously documented every detail of the research station. The coffee cups, the charging satellite phone, the humming equipment, each item told a story of routine suddenly interrupted. What troubled Murphy most was the complete absence of panic indicators. In his 20 years of investigating missing persons cases, people who encountered danger typically left signs of distress, overturned furniture, hastily grabbed supplies, activated emergency beacons. Here, there was nothing. The research station's data logs provided a precise timeline. At 8:43 a.m., Dr. Mitchell had recorded weather conditions: clear skies, temperature 52 degrees Fahrenheit, wind from the northwest at 6 mph. At 9:17 a.m., the station's motion sensors logged 2 people leaving the cabin. After that, only the automated systems continued recording temperature fluctuations, humidity levels, wind patterns, data points tracking everything except what mattered most: where the researchers had gone. Search teams expanded their efforts, dividing the forest into grid patterns. They found occasional boot prints matching the researchers' gear, but these traces disappeared roughly a mile from the station near a creek bed. Murphy's team analyzed the water flow patterns, considering whether the researchers might have followed the creek to survey downstream orchid populations. But the creek led nowhere significant, eventually wandering into a marsh where all traces vanished. Dr. Wilson spent hours poring over Connor's previous research notes, looking for patterns or locations that might have drawn the team's interest. Connor was methodical, precise, she explained to the investigators. He wouldn't have deviated from their planned survey route without good reason. The planned route, marked clearly on their maps, should have taken them through a series of documented orchid sites. Yet search teams found no sign of their presence at any of these locations. As the investigation progressed, background checks revealed no personal conflicts, no financial troubles, no signs of academic rivalry or professional disputes. Isabel Thompson's graduate work was progressing well, with her thesis committee praising her preliminary findings. Dr. Mitchell had recently secured additional funding for their research, with his department chair describing him as at the peak of his career. The forest itself seemed to resist investigation. Dense underbrush complicated search efforts, while frequent rain showers washed away potential evidence. Local hunters and trappers were interviewed, but none reported seeing anything unusual during their time in the woods. Trail cameras, typically used to track wildlife movements, had captured nothing suspicious. Lieutenant Murphy's team explored every angle. They analyzed cell phone records, though service in the area was sparse. They checked local hospitals and clinics, thinking perhaps an accident had occurred. Why even investigated whether the researchers might have stumbled upon illegal activities, drug operations, or hidden marijuana grows, but found no evidence of such operations in the area. As the first month passed, the investigation began to stall. Every promising lead ended in frustration. The research station's automated systems continued their faithful recording, creating an ever-growing database of environmental measurements that told them everything about the forest except what they desperately needed to know. Dr. Wilson refused to give up hope. "There's something we're missing," she insisted during one particularly difficult briefing. Connor and Isabel were too experienced, too well prepared for this to be a simple accident. But as autumn's colors faded to winter's gray, even she had to admit that the forest had become a vast, cold vault of secrets, holding the truth just beyond their reach. The case would eventually join the ranks of the Upper Peninsula's unsolved mysteries, discussed in hushed tones around campfires and local diners. But for those involved in those first crucial weeks, the frustration of knowing they had missed something vital would linger for years to come. The answers were there, hidden in plain sight among the trees, waiting for 18 long years before chance and nature would finally reveal their grim truth. As winter settled over Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the search for Dr. Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson gradually diminished. Snow blanketed the Hiawatha National Forest, covering whatever traces might have remained of their final journey. By December 2000, the daily search teams had dwindled to occasional patrols, and the temporary command center near the research station was dismantled, piece by piece, like the dismantling of hope itself. Dr. Patricia Wilson refused to let the case fade entirely from public consciousness. Every spring, she would organize volunteer searches, methodically covering new sections of the forest while acknowledging that time and weather had likely erased any physical evidence. She maintained a small office shrine to her missing colleagues: Connor's last published paper, Isabel's graduate school photo, and a map marked with every area they had searched. The academic community at Michigan State University felt the loss deeply. Connor's empty office remained untouched for months, his orchid specimens carefully preserved in their cases, his calendar still open to September 2000. Isabel's desk in the graduate student workspace became a somber reminder of promising research left unfinished. The department established a memorial scholarship in their names, awarded annually to students pursuing conservation biology. Each September, on the anniversary of their disappearance, Dr. Wilson would hold a small ceremony in the university's botanical gardens. Colleagues would share memories of Connor's dedication to his work, his quiet enthusiasm for discovering new orchid populations, his patient mentoring of graduate students. Isabel's parents would attend, clutching photos of their daughter in her field gear, smiling broadly among the flowers she had loved to study. The local community never quite forgot the mystery. In the small towns surrounding the Hiawatha National Forest, residents would occasionally report possible sightings or share theories about what might have happened. Some suggested they had simply gotten lost, though this seemed unlikely given their experience. Others wondered if they had encountered dangerous wildlife, yet no evidence ever supported this theory. Lieutenant Murphy kept the case file on his desk, reviewing it periodically when new missing persons cases crossed his path, always looking for connections or patterns he might have missed. The file grew thick with follow-up interviews, possible leads that led nowhere, and annual reports marking the passage of time without answers. The research station itself was eventually closed, its equipment redistributed to other projects. The university maintained the lease on the property but rarely sent teams to the area. The automated data collected during those final days was archived, its mundane readings of temperature and humidity offering no hints about the human drama that had unfolded beneath its sensors. Years passed, and the case became something of a cautionary tale among field researchers. Universities across the country strengthened their safety protocols for remote research teams. New tracking systems were implemented, and stricter check-in procedures became standard practice. Connor and Isabel's disappearance had changed the way scientists approached field research, though this offered little comfort to those who had known them. Dr. Wilson continued her own research, but always with an eye toward understanding what had happened to her colleagues. She published Connor's unfinished work, crediting him and Isabel as co-authors, ensuring their final contributions to botanical science would not be lost. Their names appeared in academic journals one last time, their work living on even as the mystery of their fate seemed destined to remain unsolved. As the years accumulated, the forest continued its cycles of growth and decay. New orchids bloomed where Connor and Isabel had once documented their predecessors. Graduate students came and went, though few stayed long in the northern reaches of the forest where two of their own had vanished. The mystery became part of local folklore, a story told to newcomers about the scientists who went into the woods one September morning and never returned. By 2017, most had accepted that the truth would never be known. The case file gathered dust in the state police archives. The memorial scholarship continued its quiet work of supporting new generations of researchers, and the forest kept its secrets. But nature has its own timeline for revealing truth, and in the spring of 2018, the Earth would finally begin to yield its long-held answers. In March 2018, as winter's grip on Michigan's Upper Peninsula began to loosen, a logging crew from Northern Timber Operations moved into a previously unharvested section of Hiawatha National Forest. The spring thaw had softened the ground, making their work messier than usual as heavy equipment churned through the mud. It was during a routine clearing operation that operator Mike Denton noticed something unusual caught in his machine's treads. What he initially mistook for tangled roots turned out to be weathered fabric, and beneath it, partially exposed by the disturbed earth, lay human remains. Work halted immediately as Denton radioed his supervisor, who contacted local authorities. Within hours, the logging site had transformed into a crime scene. The first forensics team arrived as afternoon shadows lengthened across the forest floor. Their initial survey revealed not one body, but two, buried roughly 6 feet apart. The remains were wrapped in what appeared to be deteriorated camping tarps, the kind commonly used by researchers in the field. Nearby, they discovered fragments of scientific equipment, a broken soil sampling tool, and the corroded remains of a field notebook. U.S. Forest Service agent Rachel Anderson arrived on scene just as the forensics team began their careful excavation. Having worked in the Upper Peninsula for over 2 decades, she immediately recognized the significance of the location. They were less than 4 miles from the old research station, where Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson had vanished 18 years earlier. But it was what the team found beneath the bodies that added another layer to the emerging puzzle. The soil around the grave sites showed evidence of extensive root system damage, specifically the type associated with ginseng harvesting. Scattered throughout the area were the distinctive marks of systematic plant removal, carefully hidden by surface restoration, but visible to trained eyes in the disturbed earth. Agent Anderson had investigated illegal ginseng harvesting operations before. Wild ginseng, highly prized in traditional medicine markets, could fetch thousands of dollars per pound. The plants found in the Hiawatha National Forest were particularly valuable due to their age and pristine growing conditions. But this area had been designated as protected, with harvesting strictly prohibited to preserve the delicate forest ecosystem. As the excavation continued into the evening, more evidence emerged. Fragments of the victims' clothing still clung to the remains, and despite years of decomposition, Their field gear was identifiable. A soil sampling kit, typical of the type used in botanical research, lay partially crushed beneath one of the bodies. Most significantly, they found a metal research tag of the type used by Michigan State University, its numbers matching the series assigned to Dr. Mitchell's project. The forensics team worked carefully through the night under powerful lights that cast eerie shadows through the trees. By morning, they had fully exposed both burial sites and collected dozens of soil samples from the surrounding area. The samples would later reveal years of systematic ginseng harvesting, with evidence of careful efforts to conceal the activity. Dr. Patricia Wilson, called to the scene the following day, stood silently at the edge of the excavation. After 18 years of searching, her colleagues had finally been found, though not in the way anyone had hoped. As she watched the forensics team work, her trained eye caught something the others had initially missed. The pattern of plant removal around the graves matched exactly the type of ground disturbance Connor had noted in his final research entry. The discovery sparked a new phase in the investigation, merging the missing persons case with environmental crimes. Agent Anderson's team began mapping the surrounding forest, documenting years of illegal harvesting that had destroyed protected plant populations. The damage extended far beyond ginseng, affecting entire ecosystems that Connor and Isabel had been working to protect. As news of the discovery spread through the Upper Peninsula, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The mystery of the missing scientists had finally begun to unravel, revealing a darker truth about greed, conservation, and the price some were willing to pay to protect their illegal operations. The peaceful woods that had kept this secret for so long now stood as silent witnesses to a tragedy born from the very destruction its missing scientists had sought to prevent. As spring thawed the Upper Peninsula in 2018, the investigation into Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson's deaths took on new urgency. Agent Rachel Anderson of the U.S. Forest Service assembled a joint task force, bringing together Forest Service specialists, Michigan State Police investigators, and botanical experts to unravel a case that had evolved from a simple disappearance into something far more sinister. The team's first challenge was understanding the scope of the illegal ginseng trade in the region. Wild ginseng, with its twisted roots and delicate leaves, had become a lucrative target for poachers. A single pound of mature wild ginseng could fetch upwards of $5,000 on the black market, and the Hiawatha National Forest's pristine conditions produced some of the most valuable specimens in North America. Lieutenant Murphy, now nearing retirement, rejoined the investigation he had never truly left. His original case files, meticulously maintained for 18 years, provided crucial background as the team began mapping known ginseng habitats against the locations where Connor and Isabel had conducted their research. A pattern emerged, showing their final documented research sites overlapping with areas now revealed to have sustained extensive harvesting damage. The task force established a timeline of forest degradation, analyzing satellite imagery and historical surveys. The damage wasn't random. It showed systematic exploitation spanning decades, with careful attempts to conceal the removal of protected species. Dr. Patricia Wilson's expertise proved invaluable as she helped identify areas where the forest's understory had been artificially manipulated to hide evidence of harvesting. As investigators dug deeper, they began compiling a list of individuals known to frequent the remote areas of the forest. Local rangers provided names of regular hunters, trappers, and individuals who had been previously questioned about suspicious activity. Among these names, Malcolm Stewart's appeared repeatedly in incident reports spanning 20 years, always on the periphery of investigations, but never quite linked directly to any crimes. Stewart's background revealed a detailed knowledge of the forest that went beyond casual familiarity. He had worked as a seasonal ranger in the 1980s before establishing himself as a supplier of wild-crafted medicinal herbs to traditional medicine markets. His legitimate business provided perfect cover for more illicit activities, allowing him to move through the forest without raising suspicion. The team's botanical experts analyzed soil samples from around the burial sites, revealing traces of ginseng root compound that suggested decades of harvesting. The damage pattern matched locations marked in Connor's recovered field notes, where he had documented unusual G-round disturbance. The young scientist had unknowingly been mapping evidence of environmental crimes even as he studied his beloved orchids. Agent Anderson orchestrated surveillance of known harvesting areas, using modern thermal imaging and drone technology unavailable during the original investigation. The team documented fresh evidence of ongoing ginseng poaching, suggesting the operation had continued unabated even after the researchers' deaths. The scope of environmental damage was staggering. Millions of dollars in protected plants had been stripped from the forest floor, devastating entire ecosystems. As evidence mounted, investigators began to understand the financial motive behind the murders. Connor and Isabel's research would have exposed not just the presence of illegal harvesting, but its devastating long-term impact on the forest's biodiversity. Their detailed documentation threatened to reveal a criminal enterprise that had operated in the shadows for generations. The task force's net began to tighten around Malcolm Stewart. His movements in the forest correlated with areas of documented harvesting. His financial records showed irregular cash deposits following seasonal harvesting periods. But most damning were the locations marked in Connor's recovered notes. They mapped perfectly onto Stewart's known territories within the forest. The investigation had transformed from a cold case into an active manhunt, driven by 2 decades of accumulated evidence and modern forensic techniques. As spring turned to summer, the task force prepared to confront a killer who had walked free for 18 years, protected by the very forest he had systematically exploited. The truth that had remained buried for so long was finally emerging, carried on the winds of change blowing through the ancient trees of Hiawatha. The breakthrough in the Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson case came not through a dramatic confession or a single piece of evidence, but through the meticulous analysis of Connor's own research notes, preserved despite 18 years beneath the forest soil. The water-damaged pages, carefully restored by forensic document specialists, revealed far more than their author could have known when he made his final entries in September 2000. Dr. Patricia Wilson spent countless hours decoding Connor's shorthand, translating his cryptic scientific notations into a devastating map of environmental destruction. His careful documentation of soil disturbance patterns, initially focused on understanding orchid habitat changes, had unknowingly created a precise record of Malcolm Stewart's illegal ginseng harvesting operations. Connor's notes detailed unusual ground patterns at 17 distinct locations. When overlaid with modern satellite imagery, these sites aligned perfectly with areas of documented forest damage. More crucially, they corresponded with the territorial boundaries of Stewart's known movements through the forest. The young scientist had unknowingly been building a case against his future killer. The financial implications were staggering. Agent Anderson's team calculated that each harvesting site identified in Connor's notes could yield ginseng worth tens of thousands of dollars annually. Over 2 decades, Stewart's operation had extracted millions in protected plants, leaving behind a wake of ecological devastation that would take generations to heal. Stewart's careful facade began to crack under the weight of accumulated evidence. His legitimate herb-gathering business had provided cover for years, but Connor's recovered notes exposed the true scale of his illegal operation. The precise locations documented in those water-stained pages made it impossible for Stewart to claim coincidence or mistake. When confronted with the evidence, Stewart's composure finally broke. In a small interview room at the Michigan State Police headquarters, Faced with Connor's restored field notes and Agent Anderson's careful questioning, the truth emerged. He described that September morning when he encountered the researchers photographing evidence of his harvesting operation. The confrontation had been brief. Neither Connor nor Isabel had even fully understood what they had stumbled upon. They were so focused on their orchids, Stewart told investigators, his voice hollow with 18 years of carried guilt. They thought they were documenting natural soil disruption when they mentioned publishing our findings, including the GPS coordinates. He left the sentence unfinished, but its conclusion was written in the forest soil where 2 bodies had lain hidden for nearly 2 decades. The recovery of Connor's notes provided more than just evidence of environmental crimes. His final entries, abruptly ended mid-observation, contained the exact coordinates where he and Isabel would be found 18 years later. In death, his meticulous research habits had helped solve his own murder. The task force's botanical experts analyzed Connor's documented sites, revealing the systematic destruction of not just ginseng populations, but entire forest ecosystems. His notes painted a picture of carefully organized exploitation, harvesting patterns designed to maximize profit while minimizing visible damage. Stewart had treated the protected forest as his private garden, cultivating and harvesting its most valuable species with calculated precision. The evidence proved overwhelming. Stewart's harvesting territories, documented through Connor's recovered notes, satellite imagery, and ground surveys, revealed a criminal enterprise spanning more than 20 years. The protected areas of Hiawatha National Forest had been his private hunting ground, its delicate ecosystem ruthlessly exploited for profit. When presented with the full scope of evidence against him, Stewart's resistance crumbled. He provided details about the operation that confirmed the task force's worst suspicions. Decades of systematic poaching had left lasting scars on the forest's biodiversity. The very ecosystem Connor and Isabel had died trying to protect had ultimately helped reveal the truth about their fate. The breakthrough brought both closure and renewed pain. Dr. Wilson, reading through her colleague's final notes, found herself struck by the cruel irony that Connor's dedication to scientific documentation had both cost him his life and eventually brought his killer to justice. In the end, it was the forest itself, through the careful observations of the scientist who loved it, that spoke for its fallen defenders. In June 2018, Malcolm Stewart stood before the Michigan State Court, his weathered face showing little emotion as the judge delivered a 30-year sentence for the murders of Connor Mitchell and Isabel Thompson. The man who had walked free for 18 years would spend the remainder of his life behind bars, his fate sealed by the very scientific evidence his victims had collected. The sentencing marked more than just the end of a cold case. The investigation had exposed decades of environmental destruction that would reshape forest management practices across the region. Surveys of Stewart's harvesting territories revealed damage estimated at over $12 million in lost ecosystem value, with some areas so thoroughly stripped of native species that restoration experts doubted they would ever fully recover. Dr. Patricia Wilson attended the sentencing, clutching a bound copy of Connor's restored field notes. These pages, which had helped solve the case, would be preserved in the Michigan State University archives as both evidence and memorial. The university established the Mitchell-Thompson Conservation Grant, providing funding for research projects specifically focused on protecting endangered plant species in the Upper Peninsula. The Hiawatha National Forest underwent significant changes in the aftermath of the case. The U.S. Forest Service implemented enhanced monitoring systems, including regular thermal imaging surveys and ground-penetrating radar to detect unauthorized harvesting activities. Trail cameras, disguised among the trees, now watch over known ginseng habitats, their electronic eyes ensuring no future poachers can operate with impunity. Isabel Thompson's parents used part of the restitution money to create a scholarship fund for female graduate students in conservation biology. Each year, a new researcher continues the work their daughter had begun, studying the delicate balance of forest ecosystems. The scholarship recipients carry specialized tracking devices and maintain constant communication with base stations, a direct response to the tragedy that claimed Isabel's life. The research station where Connor and Isabel spent their final days was renovated and reopened as the Mitchell-Thompson Memorial Research Center. New teams of scientists now work there, continuing the orchid population studies that Connor had pioneered. Their modern equipment includes automated sampling devices and real-time data transmission, ensuring no future researcher needs to work in isolation. Agent Rachel Anderson used the case to advocate for stronger environmental protection laws. Her testimony before state legislators detailed how the pursuit of profit had led to both environmental destruction and murder. The resulting legislation, known as the Mitchell-Thompson Act, dramatically increased penalties for environmental crimes in protected areas. The forest itself began a slow healing process. In areas where Stewart's harvesting had destroyed native plant populations, restoration teams worked to reintroduce species and stabilize damaged ecosystems. The endangered orchids that Connor and Isabel had studied showed signs of recovery in some locations, their delicate blooms a living memorial to the researchers who died protecting them. Lieutenant Murphy retired shortly after Stewart's conviction, knowing he had finally closed the case that had haunted him for nearly 2 decades. His last official act was to present Connor and Isabel's recovered field equipment to the Michigan State University Museum, where it joined an exhibit dedicated to conservation and the human cost of environmental crime. Dr. Wilson continued her research, but with a new focus on developing methods to detect and prevent environmental crimes before they escalate to violence. She often spoke to new graduate students about Connor and Isabel, ensuring their story would serve as both warning and inspiration for future generations of scientists. In the years following Stewart's conviction, the Hiawatha National Forest became a model for protected area management. Regular scientific surveys documented the gradual recovery of damaged areas, while new research projects built upon Connor and Isabel's work continued to advance our understanding of forest ecosystems. Their deaths had exposed the hidden costs of environmental exploitation and the vital importance of protecting both natural resources and those who study them. In the end, Connor and Isabel's dedication to scientific truth had not only solved their own murders, but had helped preserve the forest they had died trying to protect. Their legacy lives on in every protected plant, every new conservation law, and every young scientist who ventures into the woods, better protected and prepared because of their sacrifice.